In this tutorial, we will discuss a sample mod and take a look how the XML of a tractor is structured. To do this, we'll need the program Notepad++, which can be downloaded for free from the internet. Just press the web link button in your Giants video player and it will redirect you to the appropriate homepage. We'll download the program to our desktop and install it. Once this is done, it will be much easier to read and edit the XML files. Next, we go over to the Farming Simulator 2013 installation directory under SDK and copy the sample mod zip file to our desktop from there. After extracting these files to the recommended folder, we will see all the files needed for this mod. The files we should be most concerned with are the Deutz Agrotron X720 XML file and the Deutz Agrotron X720 i3D file. So we'll open the XML file in Notepad++ and the i3D file in the Giants editor. Now we can examine the XML in more detail. First, we'll see the XML header. This is necessary for the game to recognize it as an XML file. Next, the vehicle type is specified. This determines what functions the vehicle will have. All vehicle types based on original vehicles can be used. In addition, each mod can establish other vehicle types that have their own features. After that, the mod's i3D file is loaded. The path will always be relative to the mods folder. Generally, it is also recommended to have the i3D file stored in the same folder as the XML. Next, the vehicle's wheels are set up. The attribute auto-rotate back speed determines how quickly the tires rotate backwards when the control keys are released. This is followed by a wheel list. Each wheel must include the wrapper attribute. This index path determines where the wheel will be located. If we look at the first wheel, we see the index path 0 greater than 0 for wrapper. In the Giants editor, we can see that this is the right front wheel. This wheel has a separate fender, which should only turn along with the steering, but not in the direction of movement. Therefore, the wheel is a child attribute of the fender and is set in the XML using the attribute driveNode. If driveNode is undefined, then the wrapper object is rotated in both directions. The attributes ROT_max and ROT_min define the maximum and minimum steering angle, and the attribute ROT_speed determines the rotation speed. If the value is negative, then the wheel rotates in the opposite direction. This is useful, for instance, for rear wheel steering. The value radius indicates the wheel radius, and likewise should correspond to the radius of the visual wheel. The attribute susp_travel indicates the length of the spring suspending the wheel. The spring elasticity and internal damping, that is the spring friction, are then indicated by the values spring and damper. The spring usually starts at the 0 marker of the wrapper object in the i3D file and points vertically downwards. As a result, the wheel shifts slightly downwards. This problem can be counteracted if the starting point of the spring is shifted upwards a bit. You can specify this amount of shifting to take place using the attribute delta_y. As a guideline, you can use about half of the value for the susp_travel. The values longitudinal stiffness and lateral stiffness separately determine the frictional force of the wheels in the longitudinal and lateral directions respectively. The mass attribute indicates the mass of the wheels in tons. Engine values are set using the motor node. Likewise, the node sets the maximum speed and traction. The values forward gear ratio and backward gear ratio determines the gear ratio of the engine with respect to the wheels in forward and reverse gear. The higher these values, the faster the wheels rotate at constant engine speed. Conversely, however, more engine power is required to transmit the same amount of power to the wheels. The attribute max RPM determines the maximum rotation per minute of the engine for the 4 speed settings in the game. The attribute min RPM, however, determines the amount of idling mixtures. In order to set this value, you can use the Vehicle Motor Calculator XLL Excel sheet from the DVD. Just press the File link button at the bottom of your Giants video player in order to access it. Here we see there are 3 different areas depending on the calculation needing to be made. Each of the 4 values on the left side must be filled in, and the 2 values on the right side with the blue backdrop will be calculated automatically. Say, for example, that we want the tractor's maximum speed to be 70 km per hour. In order to do this, we will use the upper limit and set the values. We also go ahead and decide on a preferred maximum number of engine revolutions. For the purposes of our example, we will use 2250. This should also come third next to the attribute max RPM in the vehicle's XML file. We'll leave the wheel radius set to 1, since this is calculated automatically by the game when the attribute compensate wheel radius is set to true. Now all we have to do is set the value of G4, labeled as gear ratio, to the attribute forward gear ratio in the vehicle's XML. The engine power in forward and reverse gear is set using the values torque and backward torque. In addition, this generates a curve based on the engine speed, which passes through the point that was specified.